So we have what I think might be just possibly the more difficult conversation, because our 2014 benchmarking data, which was released in October of this year, reflected the highest levels of attrition of minority and women attorneys in the last decade. So just to give you the sobering stats, 23.6% of minority attorneys and 21.3% of women left signatory firms, as opposed to 14.7% of their white male peers. And to expound on that a little bit, the 2014 data also reflected a drop in minority representation at all levels across the firm. And while these are flat levels generally, we raised a red flag because we were starting to see an uptick in representation at all levels. And from 2013 to 2014, minority associates declined from 26.9% to 26.2%, special counsel from 12 to 10.9, and partners from 8.4 to 8.2. So clearly this is an area where we're passionately committed to seeing change. We've brought in the best in class, but I will say that this conversation does require a bit of candor in order to be productive. And to have candor, we need a little bit of trust. So I am following the hashtag for today's event, and we are going to talk about sensitive topics. So I would ask that when you're tweeting about this, we do really want you to share some of the best practices that are being implemented and some of the ideas, but let's not nail firms and companies to the wall. I think everybody's really struggling to find the solution to this problem, and I think we have a good news story in our panel today. So I want to start with allowing the panelists to introduce themselves, and I'd like you to talk about just who you are, where you are, what your priorities are, and how they're communicated within your firm or corporation.
Well, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Michael Blair. I'm at Debevoise. In the diversity area, I imagine we have the same priorities as everyone else, but in terms of communicating, we do a lot of formal reporting, which I won't get into. Rather, I guess I'd like to say this, that for anyone who has been involved in trying to advance the cause of diversity in law firms for any period of time, there can be a tendency to be discouraged because the needle moves slowly. And therefore, I think that if you're in a leadership position, you really have to celebrate successes, and you have to motivate people to keep at it, notwithstanding the fact that they've had certain discouragements along the way. I think if you think about when do people perform at a very high level, they perform at a very high level when they're excited about something and when they feel some sense of a deadline, a sense that you've got to act now. And so we've had the good fortune, we put some real emphasis into improving the level of diversity in our entering class a few years ago, and shockingly, it worked. And we've had now, with the class we just finished recruiting, 5 classes in a row where there is racial diversity of around 33-34% coming in. Now, only 3 of those classes have arrived, and one of those 3 just arrived in the recent weeks, because the other 2 are the class we just hired for next summer and the class that was this past summer, summer associates, and haven't joined us yet. But I'm really trying to make the point to our entire firm, and I've been doing this for a couple of years, that having these series of really diverse classes in a row gives us a special opportunity to change the face of our law firm. And we don't know whether we can out-recruit at that level going forward. So the point I'm trying to make to the partners is, let's get excited about this opportunity, but let's make it happen now. Because if we make it happen with these classes, it'll be so much easier for those that follow. And if we miss the chance with these classes, who knows when we can have such an opportunity again. And I think there's been great buy-in. I think it's spread beyond our recruiting committee to our whole firm now. People are invested, people are excited, people feel good about the fact that we have achieved this measure of success, even though we haven't cracked the ultimate nut yet of changing the face of the partnership. But what we do with these younger classes in terms of developing them will determine whether or not we ultimately crack that nut.
Great, thank you. Jackie?
Hi, as Gabrielle said, I'm a partner at Wild Agile. I just recently, like a month ago, became the chair of the diversity committee at Wild, but I've been on the diversity committee and its predecessor for, I would say, probably 20 years. I recently also became the co-chair of a new initiative that we started at Weil called the Task Force for Women's Engagement and Retention. At Weil, I think our priorities are twofold, and they're slightly different for diverse attorneys and women, because I think that the issues are different. So for our diverse attorneys, our goal right now is to get more people in the door. There simply aren't enough coming into Weil Gotshal to have the opportunity to succeed. And of course, once they get to the firm, we're very focused on making sure that they have opportunities, great assignments, work with the important partners, et cetera. For the women, we don't have any problem getting women in the door. In fact, most of our classes for many years now have been 50-50 men and women. But we do have higher attrition for women than we'd like. And part of our task force's strategy is to try to enable women to be more successful at the firm, to have bigger opportunities. So those are, they're similar goals, but they're slightly different. In terms of communicating, I think the best way that we communicate the importance of this to our firm is by our diversity programming. We have a ton of it, and they see firm leaders and people really involved in the diversity efforts, and that helps. We also try to coordinate amongst the various committees. So the hiring committee right now is very focused on the issue of diverse candidates, and our legal personnel committee is focused on seeing and particularly tracking the diverse attorneys who sometimes have a harder time adjusting to life at Weil, to make sure that they have all the tools they need for success.
Hi, so I'm Kim Coopersmith, and I'm the chair of Aiken Gump. For obvious reasons, this has been an issue that I have cared a great deal about. I'm probably the only person that is in the role of leading a firm who came up in management roles that were focused on retention and diversity. So that was how I got my first leadership role at the firm. And that's how I ended up on the executive committee and on the partnership admissions committee. So this has always meant a great deal to me. And in terms of what I am able to do in the structure of the firm, I guess I have focused my energy on a couple of things. One is with respect to our associate retention and promotion efforts. To me, this all came down to over many years of looking at what was working and what wasn't, focusing on the assignment process and developing a fair set of core competencies that everybody was judged by. And the anecdotal use of, I think he's great and she maybe is more timid, I have done everything I can to eliminate those kinds of inherent assumptions by having clarity about what is expected for our mid-level associates. What is it that we want you to be able to do? Pairing that with administrative support. So we have hired people in all of our major practices who are non-lawyers, and their task as part of running the litigation section from an administrative point of view is to track what kinds of assignments are people getting. Are people falling through the cracks? Are we making kind of assumptions that this person should be doing more of this? Or are we making sure that the deposition opportunity for next time is given to this person, not that person? And I think our partners are all extremely well-intentioned, but the task of actually looking through 200 people's evaluations to figure out what experiences they're getting and what experiences they're not getting is too much to expect. Our partners are too busy. So we have found it very successful to have someone where this is really a part of their job. Read every evaluation, get feedback on projects as they're completed, see if we're putting too many people into paths where their opportunities are repeating themselves. So that's been a big focus of ours, and one that I think has been very helpful. Focus on the assignments, who's getting what work and who's getting to exposure to the important clients, the important partners. And then the other part is on promotion. I have remained extremely active in our partner promotion process. And that means not just being at the decision process each year, but following years in advance. Who is it who's coming up in the pipeline? Pressing our practice group leaders to evaluate who is it that you see as a prospect and what can we do to invest. Because when you get to our partnership committee, if you're diverse or you're a woman, we have really strong candidates and you have a great chance of making partner, but we need people to get there and we need people to not fall off before that chance arises. So those are kind of what I'm focusing on.
A bunch of great messages. My name is Ricardo Unzeldu. I'm General Counsel of MetLife. I've spoken on this topic of retention and promotion in many different forums. And those of you who have heard me speak before know that I've been working on the subject of diversity in the legal profession since I graduated from law school 25 years ago. So I've seen a lot of things happen over the course of my career. And I think that there are a couple of things that I want to say that I think are good developments in our profession. I think that, when I graduated 25 years ago, we were still having the argument over whether diversity was a desirable thing or not. And that argument has largely been put to rest. I think that big institutions are no longer having this struggle internally. And so that's an important thing for us to note, and it actually provides the context for us to really make great progress on this issue now. I will also say that even though I agree that we need to work on this issue institution by institution, I think it's also important for us to have a perspective on it vis-a-vis the profession more broadly. We can't do this if it's just going to be a competition, as Michael says, of kind of getting the best result in the recruiting class and then making sure that Debevoise or Skadden or Cleary Gottlieb ends up having a bumper crop of partners in 8 years or 9 years. We really need to attack this more broadly as a profession, and we need to think about what's necessary in order to get there. And we've heard a bunch of very intelligent and thoughtful and insightful soundings of the process that it takes in order to make sure people are retained and promoted. Diverse talent is retained and promoted in our organizations. I would like to suggest that just as a little bit of a conceptual paradigm exercise, that we think about the fact that we use the phrase diversity and inclusion, right? So diversity first and inclusion second. And I'd like to suggest to everyone that that's sort of upside down, right? Really what has to happen, as we heard in the last panel, there were a couple of very intelligent soundings on the need for people, the need for our diverse talent to perceive that there's a path. Jamie said that. They need to perceive that there's a path when they walk in the door, and that means that we need to create the environment of inclusion as soon as people walk in the door. We need to message to our diverse talent right away that they have just as good a chance of advancing to the most senior levels of the organization right away when they get in the door. And the next thing that we have to do, as Kim just talked about, is really go through the exercise of identifying the people who are making the commitments and making the investment to make themselves into the talent that's going to advance in our organization. So here's an important footnote that we should not lose sight of. Our exercise of retaining people and promoting people into the top ranks of the organization involves a differentiation of talent with respect to diverse talent, just as much as it does with respect to white males. Let's not delude ourselves into thinking that every single diverse lawyer that walks into the firm is going to become a partner. It's not going to happen. But we need to encourage people that they can. We at MetLife have a stated objective of encouraging people to understand that they have the possibility of advancing through the organization, and then to solve the conundrum that you pointed out, Kim, of having all of us involved in reviewing all of the performance evaluations of all the diverse talent. What we do instead is we delegate into the organization the task of identifying the top talents, right? All the managers in the organization, in a collaborative fashion, across units and across sections, identify who the top talents are, and those are the people who we end up investing in to make sure that they get all of the experience that they want and they need in order to advance in the organization. I think that that's sort of the way that we need to think about this, and it's the challenge that we all need to put in front of ourselves and in our own institutions. And I would submit that we as a profession need to put that as a challenge to the profession generally, to all of the institutions. It's a topic that I will be talking about at the Leadership Council for Legal Diversity, which is an organization of managing partners and general counsels who talk about the topic of diversity. And I think that's really the path. And so the last thing I'll say is that The answer to this question and the approach to that particular issue, to my mind, is that we need to impose on every institution the obligation of making the senior-most people in the institution, the people with power, the people with stroke and influence in the institution, need to be accountable for the retention and promotion of the diverse top talents in the organization. If we go through a filtering process and we make sure that people are encouraged to make themselves into top talents, and another footnote, it's 95% perspiration, right? People make themselves into top talents by working hard. It's not really so much inherent gray matter or analytical ability. It's hard work. We create ourselves as professionals. That's how people become top talents. And if they're willing to put the effort in, they can get there. And then our senior people in our organizations need to be accountable for making sure that they see their path, Jamie, to the advancement in the organization, and they get there.
Thank you, Ricardo. I want to build a little bit on that and dig a little deeper into this creating a culture of inclusion, because we all know that that's the necessary place to go. I mean, I love the idea of putting criteria in place. It's very clear, and we talked a bit on our call about having a no exception to that criteria policy. But how do we make an environment, and I'd love to just take advantage of your 30,000 view here from all of your organizations about how that culture is created in which we're leveraging human potential and what we can do to disrupt unconscious bias, which plays a huge role in voluntary attrition. And just to be a little bit more specific, what we can do to build really terrific attorneys and build individually strong talent that is in that direct pipeline to the leadership.
Can I go first?
Yeah.
So for us, what we're starting to see positive results from is our affinity groups. We have, I think it's 5 affinity groups for African Americans, sorry, I'm counting on my fingers, African Americans, Asians, Latinos, women, and LGBT attorneys. I think we got them all. Of course, the women's affinity group is the largest. Sometimes it's unworkable because there are so many of us. But the thing about the affinity groups is it enables people to share, to communicate, and to share their experiences and discuss strategies for dealing with things. The other thing that I think may be somewhat unique about our affinity groups is each one of our affinity groups is sponsored by a member of the management committee who is not a person of that group, so that the perspective of the affinity group is shared with the management committee, and the perspective of the management committee, someone who's not in the group, is shared with the members of the group. And we have every 2 years conferences for all the affinity group members across all of our offices worldwide, and they get the opportunity to network, to have speakers, to meet with firm leaders, and it's been pretty successful so far. We're working on, perhaps for 2016, doing a pan-affinity group conference where everybody can leverage off the experiences of the other group. But I think that helps foster a feeling of inclusion. It helps people who are in different practice areas who might not otherwise meet, know each other, and use each other basically as sources for information and advice in their life at Weil.
Excellent.
Well, as we had the first of these 5 unusually diverse classes join us about 2 years ago, we brainstormed about what we could do to try to make sure we took full opportunity and provided to those classes the optimum amount of opportunity. And what we ended up with is a program that we call AMP. We're only about 20 months into it, so we have to be a little bit tentative in terms of drawing conclusions, but the results thus far have been encouraging. And under our AMP program, every diverse junior associate in the first 2 years it has a one-to-one relationship with one of the partners on the diversity committee. And that partner is responsible for one thing and one thing only, and that is making sure that that diverse junior associate gets quality work opportunities. The deal is the AMP partner checks in with the AMP associate at least once a month and intervenes, where that's necessary. I think one of the critical features of the program, and talking to the partners who are doing this work, is that the AMP partners meet once a month. And the AMP partners will readily admit that about 94% of their phone calls to their AMP associates occur within the 48-hour period before that meeting, because there is peer pressure. They don't want to show up having let their peers down on this mutual commitment that the AMP partners have made. But that's just fine. As long as those calls happen on a monthly basis, we don't care that they happen within 48 hours of the meeting. And the associates have responded very warmly to this, but more concretely, when we look at the attrition rate for the class of 2013, which is the class that's been in this now for 20 months, it is almost exactly the same for the diverse associates as it has been for the white associates. And that's kind of the first time that we've achieved that. And so I really think, advancing diversity is all about providing quality opportunity. And then, as Ricardo says, those young people have to decide, am I all in this game? Am I half in this game? But for the ones who are all in the game, you just keep the good work coming. And as I say, it's early days, and we won't know probably for another 2 to 3 years how truly effective this is. But it's encouraging, and I think other firms could think about it, because it does seem to be making a difference.
Yeah, and just to not repeat what I said before, and really it's playing off of what you both already said on assignments and on feeling comfortable. I guess 2 specific things that we've done to foster inclusiveness. One, with respect to our client relationships, is we have now for probably 10 years had an African American partner client retreat. It was the brainchild of 2 of our African American partners. I will say it had, its own degree of discussion as to whether that was appropriate. I was sold on it. I will say my predecessor as managing partner is the one who was initially sold on it, and it has been a fantastically successful event for us, because a lot of this is about opportunity, right? I mean, when you get down to this, you are going to be successful if you are building intense client relationships. So for the first time when I became chair, I guess nobody ever believed that the chair would actually attend the event. So I actually showed up in Miami and walked in and got the best standing ovation I've ever gotten. I will repeat, it's actually the only standing ovation I've ever got, but it was well worth it. And it was just an amazing event. And one of the really nice things about it was we included our council, who were our 6th, 7th, and 8th years as well, who then got exposure to the clients that are absolutely part of the potential for them to grow into in significant roles. And I was a supporter beforehand, but boy, having attended it, it is a very easy sell for me and my management committee to say I was there, and this is a great way of making everybody that's here and have a business purpose with clients feel that the firm is committed to the success of our African American partners and associates. We've done a similar thing with a women's initiative, where every few years we bring all of our female attorneys throughout the world together for one event in Washington. That also is just, if nothing else, it's extremely inspiring to see whatever it is, 300, 400 women who all are Aiken Gump attorneys together. And I think that has also created a sense of inclusiveness beyond some of the good things that people have already talked about.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that this is the Church of Diversity congregation. So, I mean, we don't really need to teach these folks very much about diversity, but we do need to teach our institutions things about diversity. So, there are 3 discrete points that I'd like to make about culture of inclusion. One is that on the topic of unconscious bias, I really think there is no way to deal with it except to take it head on. You really need to make sure that you train your organizations about unconscious bias. You need to require the people in the leadership of the organization. This is not an optional meeting. They have to go and they have to watch unconscious bias in action. And there are a ton of great opportunities to really learn about unconscious bias, and to learn, by the way, that all of us in this room have unconscious bias. It is part of the human condition that you have unconscious bias, and it's important for everybody to recognize it, especially the people who are in positions of power in the organization, who, by virtue of having the purest heart that you can imagine, think that they are immune from unconscious bias, because they really do have all of the right motivations. They really do want the legal profession to be diverse. They really do want their institutions to be diverse, but they don't see their own unconscious bias. So you have to take that head on. You know, the second thing that I'd like to talk about is the way that unconscious bias plays out in many circumstances is, at least in my experience, I've seen it happen a lot, is that you know, people who are in positions of authority, the partners in law firms or my senior people in my organization, will give a junior diverse lawyer an opportunity to do something, and something will go wrong. They're learning. They don't really know how to do what they're supposed to be doing, and the senior person in that relationship immediately jumps to the conclusion that this person doesn't have either the commitment or the intellectual firepower to do the work. They discard them, they move on, and then that reputation starts to spread in the organization. That's something that we really need to nip in the bud. We really need for people to understand that, first of all, that's generally not how white male lawyers get treated. White male lawyers generally, there's sort of an intervention to understand what is it that you didn't understand here? How can we help you be more productive as a member of our organization? At a minimum, maybe not necessarily because we think the white male is going to become a partner in the organization, but because we've made an investment in bringing this person here and we want them to be productive. Everybody should get that same treatment. Everybody should get that kind of intervention when they have a learning opportunity out of their practice experience. And then, you know, the third thing is, you know, as I said before, you know, people really need to receive the message of inclusion right when they walk in the door. They really need to be, you need to make sure that they understand that they have an equal shot at success in the organization. I think it's critical. You just can't emphasize that enough, because the flip side of this walk-away phenomenon that I just described is that young lawyers coming into an organization, junior people coming into an organization, often come into the organization believing that they're not going to be there for very long. They come in believing that this is really just a way station where they're going to collect some money, you know, to knock down a huge pile of debt, and then they're going to move on. So if you don't do something to try to disabuse them of that foregone conclusion, they probably will leave in a couple or 3 years. And you know, it's not only not good for your diversity statistics, it's also not good for your productivity as an institution.
So this may be aspirational, but I do want to talk briefly about what accountability systems can be put in place. You know, for law firms and organizations, maybe some of the panelists could talk about how clients, firm relationships can be leveraged, RFPs, strategic plans, to ensure that, you know, inclusion is a key priority for your institutions.
So what we do is we have quarterly meetings, department by department with our major departments, of the department chairs, the staffing partners, the staffing admin, and the evaluation people, and me. And we go through every diverse lawyer in that department, how they're doing. We go through the numbers first, but then we go through literally, we put them up, you know, put their faces up on the screen and their bios, and we talk about how every diverse lawyer in that department is doing, you know, what is the next developmental challenge that they need to address, what is the plan for this person, et cetera. And I think this is something we just started doing maybe 2 years ago. And I think the cumulative effect of the department chairs having to really know their people, I mean, in a way that they knew some of them before, but I think the fact that they've got to go in and report on a quarterly basis and have you know, an informed conversation about how they're doing, I think gets them a lot more invested in those particular people. And I think, you know, when you say accountability, this isn't something where we slap people's wrists and that kind of thing. This is more something where we encourage and we just really make sure they're on top of their people, and we celebrate successes when they occur.
And I would say similarly, so I started distributing to all of our practice group leaders each year what the diversity and gender statistics look like. I used to have one-on-one conversations, and one of the things that I found was that I would call it the competitive nature of lawyers. When I would have a practice group leader say, look, I'm doing everything I can, we can't keep people, we've done everything we can do. When you start to see we have 11 practice areas, some people are doing this really well, and there's no magic potion in that particular practice. So I think by making the information available to all the practice group leaders, you do feel a little bit more of a sense of ownership by each individual practice group, that simply saying, I can't, I've done all I can do, doesn't really hold up when you see that some practices have just done much better than others. And tracking, as I said before, who is up for promotion, who's staying in the pipeline, all of those ways of demonstrating accountability, again, without it being negative, because I don't think lawyers respond particularly well to that, but by celebrating the practices that are doing this well. Highlighting last year we had more women than men make partner. We had 5 of the 14 people that made partner were diverse. And the lead paragraph in my announcement of new partners was about the fact that the class that was promoted was diverse. Because I know that my partners will then be thinking, this is really important. Wow, this is a great announcement, and you know what? We got incredible feedback, including from you, which got sent to me. So that's the system working. That we had general counsel say, this is a pretty amazing list of new partners. We like seeing that. And that reinforces the message to me, that reinforces the message to the practice group leaders, and it's kind of, the whole Lion King circle of life thing, that you have clients supporting it, you have partners supporting it, and you find that the management task of bringing people along is easier when that's happening.
On a more, I was going to say tangible or crass level, we include diversity. One of our questions on our report cards that partners are required to do every year at compensation time says, report on your efforts at diversity, inclusion, and whatnot. I like to think that it gets factored into the mix. I think that we still have a bit of a ways to go, as do most firms. I can't imagine that firms are going to not give, how do I say this? I'm conscious of your tweeting thing. That firms are going to take into account diversity efforts as much as they are rainmaking efforts with big clients, but I'm hopeful that that will change in the future, and if we keep requiring people to report on it, I'm hoping that will really inspire everyone, those who might not have the same drive that we all do in this area, to be more practical and in their own self-interest really increase their diversity efforts.
That was a good news story for us, because last year we started collecting information on systems that were in place to track diversity progress, and this year we saw more than 50% of law firms do include partner evaluation of diversity efforts.
So that's sort of half the step, and the next step to complete it is to actually act based on what's in there. But
so I do want to provide time for questions, but I know that it's difficult to leave these programs and be inspired to bring something back to your firm. So I'm going to reverse the order of this just so that everybody gets the time they deserve to comment on. What are some actionable takeaways that we can go back to our respective law firms and companies today with and try to implement meaningful change within our diversity inclusion efforts?
Well, I think these conversations can be useful in a practical way, and I'll cite as an example, we have a diversity speaker series in our firm, and recently Ricardo actually was good enough to take time to come and be the speaker at one of these lunches, and he described the system that he has put into place at MetLife, where I believe, Ricardo, all of your direct reports have responsibility for a high potential, diverse, younger attorney. And that sparked quite a bit of conversation in the room among associates and partners, and prompted us to give some thought to how we could get our management committee / department chair group more involved in a hands-on way with our own high potential younger talent. And we actually just talked about that at our management committee meeting this past Tuesday morning, and are marching down that road. So I think we can, and ours won't look exactly like Ricardo's because it's a law firm environment as opposed to a corporate environment, but I think we can learn from one another and then, adapt these ideas into our own environment.
Yeah, on that topic, I think I would like to mention that there is a tendency in some institutions, probably none of them represented on the stage, but there's a little bit of a tendency on the part of especially law firms, but I think also in-house departments, to feel like, okay, if we get, you know, sort of a critical mass of people of color and a critical mass of women and a critical mass of LGBT partners, then we can kind of delegate this issue to them so they can take care of it. That's not going to work. It's not going to work because in general, those people are the newer partners. In general, those are the new generation of partners in the organization. They don't have very much pull. And in order for this process to really work, the leadership of the organization needs to own it. And you need to make sure that, you know, diversity doesn't end when you've, you know, ticked the box on a certain number of partners in the class. This is going to have to be an ongoing process, and it's going to have to be part of the way that we operate as a profession, is to be giving attention to this issue from now on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I remember speaking, I think, at a client's outside counsel diversity conference, and there was this theme that all of the women and diverse lawyers were supposed to be in charge of solving this problem. They were supposed to be the mentors to everyone. And I was on the panel, and I'm sure I sounded mildly disrespectful, but I said, look, we first started a mentor program probably 20 years ago, and I had 17 women sign up to be my mentor because I was the only person that had kids. And everybody thought, oh, if I sign up for her, I'll find the magic secret to how you can have children and do this. That is not a viable answer, okay? I can't have 17 mentors, and frankly, it's not me that, I need the white males who have spouses stay at home to understand this. I need everybody to buy into this. It's not me that needs help understanding this. So really trying to include more people in the onus of shaping who is going to change the environment for all of our lawyers. That's like a huge step, but we have to move off of the who has the responsibility for making this change. I think we are all in positions where we can drive people's interest in this, but not so that it's outsourced to the people who already get that this is an issue.
Jackie, anything you want to add?
Sure. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. And in fact, one of the things our women's initiative has done is create mentoring circles at Weil, where we have a female partner and a male partner, and 6 female associates participating in a mentoring circle. And our executive partner, Barry Wolf, happens to be one of the members of the pilot mentoring circle. And he's noted on numerous occasions that by participating in that, all of a sudden, he's understanding how the women feel. Or so, I mean, and please, I don't mean any disrespect to Barry. He's a wonderful person and very supportive. But it's just a different perspective when you're in an intimate environment and you're talking about issues that can be very personal, to really hear it and feel it and get it. And he's kind of re-inspired on the diversity front. So it's key to have those white males invested in this. I guess for my part, having done this also for about 20 years, I know it can be very disheartening to work in this area, and that change comes really slowly. My advice is that we just all have to keep trying, keep trying new approaches, be creative. The diversity fatigue issue is something that we face at Weil, where people say, oh no, another diversity event, and we just have to, including some of my best friends, we just have to push through it and get there and keep doing it. And I think all of you have actually alluded to the fact that law firms shouldn't be competing on diversity at this point. We should really all be working together. I've heard some great ideas both today and during our preparation calls that we can all learn from one another, and we should all be in this together to improve the communities in which we work.
So if I can just jump in one moment. It does take a long time, but it's taken way longer than it should have, right? I was talking about diversity when I joined Cleary Gottlieb in 1990 in the wake of resolutions that had been passed by the Association of the Bar of the City of New York. And the diversity of the profession from then till now has not really changed very much. It's changed a little. We have more women partners in big law than we did then. We have a few more people of color who are partners in big law than we did then. But it's not anything like what we had aspirations to do. And I submit to you that as lawyers, we would not accept failure of this magnitude in anything else that we do. This is absolutely unacceptable. We have to address this, and we have to do it more quickly than anybody has ever accepted.
Thank you. Yeah, I do want to take time now to take questions from the audience. Questions?
Hi, I'm Vanetta Amory. And I guess I've been in the space for long enough time to feel some of the same sentiments that you feel. But part of the problem, I think, is the way law firms are structured, right? That's a huge piece of that. They're not structured like a corporation. There's no external oversight, none. No accountability, none, to anyone other than themselves. What are law firms? They are partnerships of like-minded people. Basically, they're affinity groups of the same gender and race. And so unless that's addressed and recognized, and the accountability measures that can be put in place where law firms become accountable for not having the talent and the leadership that they should have, nothing will change. Now, it's true clients are beginning to drive that, and that's a terrific thing. You can't stop, because that's the only thing law firms listen to, their clients. But this is a huge issue that needs to be confronted really directly and upfront. So thank you for that candor, and I'm happy to share my own thoughts.
Hi, I'm Monica Bay, and there's a new book out by Anne Marie Slaughter. It's called Unfinished Business, and it's very long, but it's worth it. One of the things that really got me going on it was the concept of the language that we use to describe caregiving and some of the stereotypes that are there. And her thing is much more elegant than I'm presenting it. But one of her arguments is we simply have to change the language, because if you change the language, you're going to change perceptions. One example is the stereotype of having a stay-at-home dad. And she acknowledges that one of the big problems for women and men both is managing if you're going to have a family. And how do you manage that, and how do you deal with it? And I think that is, her book is not perfect, but it has some very, very, very concrete advice, and I'd be curious if anyone else has already read that.
I want to add to that, actually, because it builds on what you were saying earlier about making diverse partners accountable for all of the diversity initiatives within the firm. And I think a lot of that has to do with the untapped talent that is available in advancing diversity and inclusion in white males within our respective organizations. I get frustrated every time I'm in one of these events and less than half of the room is white male leadership. And we have to take that onus off of diverse leaders of law firms and corporations and empower them with the tools that they have to speak about their own diversity and inclusion goals. And part of that is in the languaging. Like, it's a very precarious place to be in when you're a white, straight male talking about diversity. You're not sure what words to use. You don't want to trip over specific issues or topics. So I think that's a really good takeaway and if I can offer one, I would say, grab a white male within your organization. I'm very lucky to be underneath an executive director who's a white male, who is the biggest cheerleader for diversity and inclusion. I learn from him all the time. So go back to your organizations and kind of tap that talent and say, I'd love for you to come with me to this program. I'd love for you to read this book. Here's an article that I think would be helpful for level setting.
It's funny that you mentioned that book, because in my particular department, we have a women's breakfast every month. And yesterday's topic was that book, because a few months ago we talked about the article or maybe it was a year ago, that Anne Marie Slaughter had written. I haven't read the book yet. I know that she made I've read the articles about the book, that she advocates change in the workplace, which will help women tremendously. I read one article that was actually a little bit critical and pointed out that the changes in the workplace will help the middle and lower level employees, but it may not change the C-suite people that they were talking about. I mean, the fact that there aren't very many women executives or at Fortune 500 companies. But I think that she has opened up a whole area of discussion, which will be very interesting to see how it plays out over the next few months.
And actually, my reaction on that was that she spent almost too much time on, well, because her background, she was a professor at Princeton.
Right.
And was on Hillary Clinton's
Right.
Staff for 2 years, and she had 2 boys. And my concern listening to it is this going to address some of the other issues that are out there, and she acknowledges that. But I highly recommend it. It's a long read. I do it on audiobook, but it's really worth going through.
Well, the other thing I think that's interesting about that whole situation is she did leave the White House staff to become a professor at Princeton. It's not a slouchy job. It's hardly like she failed. She was, and then she went back. But
she made the decision not to stay because she had to.
And she went back to Princeton, and you
And
know.
she got a lot of heat from the Atlantic thing.
Right.
She talks a lot about it too. But
Yeah.
it's important to get the dialogue, and I think it's fine to have controversy too, because that keeps the dialogue going.
The one thing I would add to that, I too have read everything but the book. I've read all of the controversy and all the articles. But one thing it did, I was always comfortable talking about my choices, which included that I worked 4 days a week for a significant part of my career. I returned full time at a point. I ended up in leadership roles. There were times that I took it easier, and try to make particularly the women at my firm, understand the journey concept. There are times that I have been in this 3,000%, and there are times that I have had to balance different priorities, and how you get from here to there it's actually part of the fun. You know, I look back now over 35 years, I could never have expected I was going to be sitting here. But you look at the places where life took you in one direction or the other, where you really stepped on the gas pedal, where you decided to take more in, and enjoy it and celebrate it and make people feel comfortable that that is all part of the arc of your working life.
You know, there's an important point here that I think that law firms should address, and that is to try to point out this aspect of diversity to your clients. I mean, I do it in my organization, but I know that lots of clients don't, right? Traditionally, the clients have sort of felt like the law firm is our slave, and so we'll deliver to them whatever assignment we want to deliver to them at 4 p.m. on Friday afternoon, and, you know, let the chips fall where they may, right? That's really a behavior that you really need to talk with your clients about in order to, you know, have sensitivity to the diversity impacts of it, right? We want to have women on our teams. We can't be delivering assignments to the law firms that prevent the women from going home and having dinner with the kids, right? I mean, or the men, frankly. I mean, everybody needs to have a life, and the clients need to be sensitive to that. I make sure that my lawyers who are hiring outside counsel are sensitive to that. But it's something you need to push back on the clients about. And, you know, I have lots of friends in law firms, associates and partners alike, who don't feel like they have the ability to tell the client, sure, you know, we'll get that document to you tomorrow morning, but I'm not going to get it to you tonight at 9 because I have family things to do, and I need to have time to do that. And you really need to have that candid conversation with your client. They need to understand that the lawyers who are doing their work are people too.
I think we're over time, and are we allowed to take one more question? Bloomberg's permitted us to take time for one more question, but we are following this panel with a networking lunch. So I do encourage, it's very hard to get this conversation out in 45 minutes. So we'll take one more question and then set everybody free.
Luke Aneke, WPP, and the question is this. A lot of minorities are used to accretion of experiences of exclusion. How do you empower them to be able to complain about something like unconscious bias, especially where there's very significant asymmetries of power? In other words, if they're going to complain, they're probably going to complain about or to a partner. How do you empower them to be able to raise these issues delicately, but in a way that it's resolved without ruining reputations?
Well, we're sitting here to empower you in that way. I would not characterize this as a complaint. I would characterize this as sort of an understanding, a sort of epiphany on the part of the profession that, you know, we really need to recognize this phenomenon of unconscious bias. It's a pretty widely recognized phenomenon now. You have people, you know, on stages like this all the time talking about it, and really this is not a question so much of complaining about it as a question of sort of educating the organization about the impacts of it. And the piece that I said before about recognizing that everybody has it is a very important part of the equation.
I think the question might have been slightly different, which is if a particular associate experiences something, are there procedures in place? I mean, at Weil we have a procedure which is, I think, rarely invoked for diversity complaints, and there's a whole procedure ensuring anonymity and people that you can speak to, but I don't know that that's all that effective, frankly.
How are you going to know that that's unconscious, though? I mean, if it's bias, that's a different
No, because
thing.
the person on the receiving end assumes that it's bias and that there was something inappropriate done. The person on the delivering end might not realize that. But what I was going to say is we've started a new initiative for this year called the Upstander Program. And I think it's based on something that an organization called Facing History may have originally coined the phrase, where people who are bystanders, who weren't part of the objectionable behavior, learn tactics and methods for standing up for the person who's the diverse associate who was the subject of a particular comment or action. So hopefully that's one way. If we get everybody educated about the best way to deal with things, maybe that will be a way that the particular associate doesn't have to go complain, but we can all help each other.
Gabrielle, if I could just chime in, one thing that we do at Debevoise and have done for a fair number of years is we charge the staffing admin people with building relationships with the associates. And I can't tell you over the years how often we've heard about, you know, a family crisis, someone's parent being very ill, those kinds of things, through that channel where the junior associate didn't feel comfortable raising it with a partner. And with respect to the diverse associates, we have our diversity professional has that same charge. That's part of her mandate, part of her job is to get to know these people, forge relationships with them. And I think they are viewed as not as, you know, scary and intimidating as a junior associate may view a partner as being. And they mediate that, and I think it's worked actually quite well.
Great. Well, I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank Bloomberg for having us and all of you for participating in today's forum.